Dave interacted with the crowd afterwards, came down along and shook people's hands. And as he walked towards me, I said, I couldn't find my Reading t-shirt this morning. I'd love to have brought it to get a sign or something. And he says, there's always another time. And he gave me a hug.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Foos Files, the podcast for fans of the Foo Fighters. It's Dan here, back with you for your weekly Foos fix, as always. And we're going to church this week, as you might have guessed, because the big talking point, of course, over the past few days has been that Other Voices performance that the Foo Fighters recorded back in February, but it finally got its airing on Easter Monday on Irish television on the channel RTE. It also went out online, so I know many of you have had a chance to watch it now. And it was great fun, wasn't it? Seeing them packed onto that tiny stage in a small church in Dingle, County Kerry, over on the west coast of Ireland. And there were just 80 people, very, very lucky people, who were able to get in. And we're going to talk to one of those shortly. But yeah, what a tremendous amount of fun. As I say, they're on this tiny stage, and my first observation was, where's Nate? I can't see him. And that's because he was kind of shoved at the back. And Jason Faulkner was blocking him to start with. You could barely see Nate until the camera zoomed in on him. And then, of course, you had Dave walking up and down the church aisle, high-fiving fans, etc. Absolutely brilliant. And then the all-important bit, the music itself. We've talked about A320 already, but wow, what a performance that was. I mean, you could feel that the hairs stand up on the back of your neck when the string part played by Rami on the keyboard kicked in. But then as the song builds, as I say in the conversation with our guest shortly, you're just kind of going, wow, that church looks like it's about to shake, and wow, just fantastic. We got to hear a professionally shot version of All People, the latest new song that they've been playing at the pop-up shows. And I've got to say, my first impressions of that were really, really strong. Very punky vibe, almost Green Day-esque in the chorus, which some people raised their eyebrows when I said that, but I did hear that. And you got Chris and Rami chipping in with the harmonies on that, which sounded really lovely. And the overall clarity of sound in that little church, St. James's Church, was brilliant. As somebody pointed out, who I was talking to on the Foos Files Instagram page, you could hear what all three guitars were doing very distinctively, which sometimes gets lost in a sort of stadium gig environment. And then for those of us who haven't been able to see any of the pop-up shows yet, or see Ilan Rubin play with the band, and we've just been relying on the online clips, getting to see some of the new breakdowns in the older songs too, that was really, really interesting. And yeah, extremely fun viewing to round off the bank holiday weekend. As mentioned, we are going to bring in one of the very lucky people who managed to get into St. James's Church to see the performance back in February. We've got Aiden O'Connor, who not only gives us a great synopsis of the performance itself and everything that happened around it, he gives us a nice potted history of Other Voices and the local music scene over there too, because he actually owns his own pub/music venue called Mike the Pies, which has put on some very famous bands over the years, as you're going to hear. And he's really doing his bit to support new bands and the local music scene over there, which is absolutely great. And he's just a massive music fan. He's been following Dave since the Nirvana years. He attended their show in Dublin in the early 90s, and then the Reading Festival, that famous performance in 1992 as well. It is worth pointing out that you may notice a little bit of sound drop-off intermittently during our conversation, because we had a couple of connection problems and had to change recording devices midway through. But it's still a brilliant chat with Aiden. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So let's bring him in to talk about the Foo Fighters live at St. James's Church in Dingle, County Kerry, Ireland, for the TV show Other Voices. Here is music fan and pub/music venue owner, Aiden O'Connor.
Hi. It's gonna get loud. Loud.
Aiden, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about the Foo Fighters Other Voices show in Dingle, which you were at a few weeks ago, and the rest of the world finally got to see it on Monday evening, which was absolutely brilliant. So, first of all, it's to those of us who aren't really aware of Other Voices in Ireland, it's filmed in this small church, which is a strange place for a Foo Fighters show. There was about 80 people there. You were one of them. So, first of all, foremost, A, how did you find out about it? And B, how does one get tickets for a show like that?
So I've got a small music venue in Listowel in Kerry called Mike the Pies. We're going 11 years. It's a 100 capacity venue. Started it with, I went, just a quick background. I went to Carter Unstoppable Sex Machines' last ever gig in Brixton Academy, and I had a chance meeting with Franklin Walters, the Irish band from Cork. And I'd taken over the pub for my dad, and just got talking to the Franks and said, it'd be a dream of me for you to play my pub. And they agreed to do it. So I started doing that over the years, and I had Richie Ramone, Hugh Corwin from the Stranglers, Henry Clooney from Stiffle Fingers in my first year or two. And then I suppose my most famous gig was when Fontaine's DC played here as a support band in 2017 to about 25 people. And they fell in love with the place, and they came back the following year and headlined with Murder Capital supporting. There was 58 people paid a tenner. I think you get a lot more than 58 people now if the gig was on. And then they finished their tour here in 19, and we had a few gigs cancelled over COVID, and obviously they're humongous now. But in that time, there was a cult band from Cork in the 80s called Scullion, and the lead singer of Scullion is a person called Philip King, and he lives back in Dingle. He's from Cork, but he lives in Dingle, and he set up Other Voices about 25 years ago. And I suppose most famously, Amy Winehouse played there years ago. It was one of the most famous gigs. But there's a small church that holds about 70 or 80 people. So what they do is they might have maybe 10 or 12 gigs in the church over a weekend, and then they do a lot of smaller gigs in Dingle town and in the surrounding areas. There's like a music trail, and I've been to that, and that's where you kind of pick up smaller bands and stuff. And so that normally takes place late November, early December. So Wednesday, whatever that was, around the 17th or 18th of February, I had 2 missed calls from Philip, because I got to know him obviously because he played in my venue. I had 2 missed calls from Philip, and he says, "Are you around on Sunday?" He says, "We're doing a special recording in the church, but I can't tell you who it is. But I'd like to offer you 2 tickets." And I was like, "Oh, come on, Philip, you can't just, I don't want to go back to someone who I've no interest in, you know." And he was like, "I think you'd love it. They'd be one of the biggest American bands of all time." So I kind of narrowed it down to Foo Fighters, Chili Peppers, and Green Day were the 3 I had in my head. And any of the 3 would have done me, do you know what I mean? But so that was Wednesday. So then it was I was honoured obviously to be invited, and he just said it was a thank you for looking after young bands and stuff, and putting on gigs in a small venue, which obviously are so important to the music industry. And that was Wednesday. On Thursday, I had to you had to send off emails with your details and all this kind of thing. And Saturday then news broke on Twitter, because obviously the crew had arrived and the fly cases had the Foo Fighters logo on it, so word kind of spread. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine that day saying, "Did you hear this is happening?" And at the time, my wife hadn't decided was she going or not. So he supplies the PA to Mike Pies if I've big gigs. So I offered him the ticket. So we got another email on this Saturday outlining how it all had to be done, and it was very professionally done. Like, myself and Kevin went, but I couldn't collect Kevin's ticket. It all had to be done very professionally. So off we headed on Sunday morning to see the Foo Fighters in a church with about 70 or 80 people. It was crazy.
Amazing. No, thanks for that, because it's a lovely potted history of the show and the kind of the scene around there as well that obviously you're involved in. So, I mean, describe what it was like? Because they walk on stage through that little door and they play A320, which they've hardly ever played over the years, and that builds up and it kicks in, and you're looking at the venue and you're like, that place looks like it's going to shake in a minute.
Yeah,
and Dave's kind of said, it might get loud in here, so just tell us about what the vibe was like in there.
So the gig was planned. The doors were 5:30, as far as I can remember. The gig was 6. You were warned you had to be here by 3:00 because they wanted everything done correctly. Like at the end of the day, then it's a TV show, so like it has to be done properly. Like it's not just a normal gig that you can take chances and stuff. It was all going to be done properly. So I got down around 3:00. When I got my ticket in the hotel across the road from the church. Like Dingle's a small town, a couple of thousand people, so I was hanging around, and next thing Chris came down the street, came out of a car, and I had a Mike the Pie's scarf with me. So I showed him the scarf, told him I had a small venue, and then he took a picture, no problem at all. I posted that on my socials, and they were all reacting to it. Then, the word was out the word was out anyway that Foo Fighters are playing, but I hadn't told people I was going, because I was privileged to be asked to go, so I wasn't going to let me be the one letting the secret out, So we got queued up, got into the church, and there was it's only about 75 cabs. I think about 60 downstairs, about 20 upstairs. So whatever that is, about 10 rows of people. So there was one seat available in the third row on the aisle, so I nabbed that. And next thing, the show was Philip King, the owner of Other Voices, was going around handing out earplugs, warning us how loud it was going to be and stuff. And it was great to be at a gig with no phones. So we were all warned to put away the phone, not even on airplane mode, because it might interfere with the Wi-Fi and stuff. And they wanted to cover every angle, and they didn't want to sneak in out what was going on for obvious reasons. So, and if they make the presenter of Other Voices, introduced Foo Fighters and out they came. And even at the time, you were like, we get 3 minutes, half an hour max. Do you know what I mean? But we got an hour and 20 minutes. They played all the classics. They played about 3, or you saw most of it last night anyway, but they played, I think, 2 or 3 of the new album. And look, it was incredible. Obviously, it was very loud. There was one time that Dave said, you want the acoustic version or the full-on stadium version? And obviously, everyone wanted the stadium version. So towards the end of the third song, Dave came, you could see that on the show, Dave came down and was standing straight in front of me, and just, I think it was times like these, and just Conlon basically roared into my face, and you're like, so what do I do here? It's a TV show, So I just put up my hands, and he gave me a high five. And it was the 19-year-old that Trevor's Theatre Van all their years ago would have been so proud and would believe that would happen, So, and then I had a further interaction during the gig when he asked the crowd how many people had seen Foo Fighters before. Me, along with another 40 or 50, roared we had, whatever. And one fella near enough to me shouted, I saw Nirvana once. And I shouted, I saw Nirvana twice. And he was like, where did you see us? Dave goes, and I said Dublin 92 and Famous Reading gig in 92 as well. And he says, well, I tell you what about these guys, they're both over 50 years of age. So that was our gag. And they finished with Everlong, and Dave interacted with the crowd afterwards, came down along and shook people's hands. And as he walked towards me, I said, I couldn't find my Reading t-shirt this morning. I'd love to have brought it to get a sign or something. And he says, there's always another time. And he gave me a hug. And it was incredible to say, but what I haven't seen yet, there was a photographer there, and he captured the hug that I got from Dave Grohl. So eventually, when everything settles down and he can release his photographs, he says he's copy of a picture for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned the high five, because I know a lot of people now will have seen this on RTE because it went out on Monday night, and then it's on RTE Player as well. So a lot of people outside of Ireland have seen it now. You're the fella in the Adidas top on the left-hand side.
That's right, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, and it was lovely, wasn't it, that he mentioned, because obviously he's got a bit of a history with County Kerry, and he said, I've been to Dingle before,
and he talked a little bit about, he didn't tell the famous hitchhiker story again, but he talked about bringing his mom and his sister over to Dingle in the Nirvana days, which was a nice touch, wasn't it?
It was timed. It was after Curtis passed away, and Nirvana were obviously no more, and he was trying his head around what was going on, and he'd been to Rena Kerry previously, and he came over on with his sister, his mum, I think originally in 92, and then around 95 or so, he decided to go on his own to Rena Kerry, and he saw a hitchhiker, and as he got closer, he saw the Nirvana t-shirt, and he kind of, I think he drove on, didn't he? He didn't pick him up, but he said that moment inspired him to get back in the game and found Foo Fighters and stuff. So he has a connection with Dingle and with Kerry anyway, you know.
Almost 35 years ago, it was just before Nirvana was playing the Reading Festival in '92, so I brought my mother and my sister here to just do the entire Ring of Kerry. We went all the way down the East Coast, made it out to the West, came here, spent a little time. Had no idea there were dolphins in Dingle. I didn't know this. Yeah, that's the one that really stuck out.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your venue? Because you know what, they love to do these small shows. So one day, Mike the Pies is available. So why not County Kerry again? You'd find room for them, wouldn't you? So
yeah, we make it available. Yeah, look, my great grandfather bought the pub in 1907. Would have been a very small, like he would have got maybe 15, 20 people into the pub. There was a small shop at the front, and over the years, the shop was moved, the kitchen was moved upstairs, and my grandfather took over in the 30s. My grandmother would have made meat pies for the family during the soul races, which would be the big week of the year. And my grandfather's name was Michael O'Connor, and there was 4 or 5 Michael O'Connors in town, and he became known as Mike the Pie. That's where the name came from. And then my uncle took over in the 60s. My dad took over in 84. He did 30 years, and I'm here now with 12 years. So, as I said earlier, a year into that, I had a chance, or 6 months into run the pub, I had a chance to meet with Paul Linner from the Frank Walters. So I started off doing maybe a gig a month, and they started bringing in support bands, and as I said, Fontaines were one of the famous ones. A few of the English bands that played over the years, Richard Hugh Conwell, the Polecats played here, Charlie Price have played here a few times, Magic Numbers have played here, Tom Baxter, I'm trying to think of a few more. Then the big names over the last few years, the Undertones have played here twice, Ash have played here twice, some of the kind of the big names there at the moment, Kingfisher and Amble, they actually played in the same bill one that 15 quid Amble was supporting. Obviously the Fontaines thing is the one because they're absolute superstars at the moment, but they're still so down to earth about the whole superstars that they are now, but they're still very down to earth, and it's great, you know. So but yeah, it's a tough game at the moment. Then money isn't as plentiful as it might have been one time, so people are kind of picking and choosing their gigs, and they're waiting till the last minute. But there's nothing better than seeing a young support band supporting a big name, you know, and who knows what's going to come the big ones next, you know. So we keep at it. We have a young local band called the Blow-Ins here on Thursday night, and there's a band called Big Sleep here next week. Did Shabs, and then there was a big Irish band from the 90s called Cry Before Dawn. So there's a band called Theatre coming in the middle of May. They're from Limerick. We do a lot of tribute acts in as well. There's the UK REM tribute coming. So without trying not to overdo the tributes, because you don't want to lose what you're trying to do with original music. But it's a tough game. We get a bit of support from the government every now and again, which helps. But it's always good to support your venues and be there early, because there's not much to the support band playing to 10 people, which isn't nice for anyone, you know. So try and get in early, no matter where you are over the UK or Ireland. Get in early and support where your music venues and support the bands and buy their merch and buy a few pints at the bar as well, which pays our bills, you know. So, but it's living the dream. I'm always a big music fan, but now I'm in a great position that I can bring some backs to Mike the Pies and the Soul in County Kerry.
So that's Aiden O'Connor, owner of the pub and music venue Mike the Pies over in County Kerry, Ireland, which I've checked out online. And I've got to say, I really want to go there to see some live music next time I'm over in Ireland. It sounds great, and it's just brilliant that he's doing so much to support the local music scene. It's hard work for these venues, but it's a timely reminder wherever you live that it's great to get out and support local artists and venues, because they are the lifeblood of any music scene, really. And thanks to Aiden for sharing his experience of the Foo Fighters show at St James's Church too. On that, I've got one other message to read out from somebody else who was at the performance as well. So this is Delia Nolan Kennedy, and she's a native of Dingle, where the show was recorded. And she sent in this lovely message. It says, "The whole weekend was such a roller coaster of emotions. I'm still not right. I was so scared I wouldn't get to see them. The FOMO was real, but also terrified of actually meeting them and saying something stupid." And she's put a laughing emoji. "I caught a few glimpses of them on the Saturday and came face to face with Rami, but decided to just smile and not say anything. He smiled back. That was enough. He knew, I knew, he got it. I never expected to get into the concert. It's always next to impossible to get into the Other Voices shows. But there's never been anyone I really wanted to see. The buzz around the pubs that weekend was as good as being in the church, but I begged a local businessman to get me in. He got me a pass on the Saturday, but when I went to collect my wristband on the Sunday, there was a misunderstanding and I lost out. I literally went home and cried. The fall from being so excited to disappointment was just too much. But at 4:15, I got a call from him, the local businessman, to say he'd managed to get me in. I raced up to his bar and got my wristband. I've no words for the whole thing. I was in the third row, only a few feet away from the band I've followed and adored for over 30 years, and Dave since Nirvana days. I cried more over Taylor Hawkins' death than some family members. So to be sitting there in a little church in my hometown looking at the band was the best feeling I've ever felt. I didn't stop smiling for days after. Best experience of my life. Apologies to my husband and kids." So that's Delia Nolan Kennedy from Dingle, Ireland. Absolutely lovely message. And I wanted to give Delia a shout out anyway, because it was her that got in touch with me. She was a bit shy about actually coming on a podcast, but it was her that recommended me to go and speak to Aiden from Mike the Pies. So more evidence of the Foo community doing its best to help each other out wherever we are in the world. So thanks, Delia, and it was an absolute pleasure to read out your message. So that's it for this week. We're desperately close now to album launch day. We're just over 2 weeks away. So we'll keep pinging the content out before then until we're able to get our hands on the album. So thanks again for listening to Foos Files. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button on your favourite podcast app to ensure you never miss an episode. In the meantime, take care, and I'll see you next week.